Once upon a time, in the small, quiet town of Abia, there lived a beautiful young woman named Osinachi. She lived in a small town, and many people liked her because she was kind and polite. One day, she met Emeka. He was tall, strong, and always smiling. At first, Emeka treated Osinachi like a queen. From the first day, Emeka didn't let Osinachi rest. He would visit her house with gifts, wrappers, shiny jewelry, and even baskets of fruits. "You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen," he would say, making her cheeks turn red like ripe tomatoes. Emeka knew how to make Osinachi laugh. His jokes were like cool water on a hot day, refreshing and sweet. Everyone in the town started whispering. "Osinachi has found a man," they said. "Emeka treats her like a queen." Osinachi felt lucky. Her heart danced like a drum whenever she thought of him. Maybe he's the one, she told herself, smiling as she looked at the gifts he had given her. But deep inside Emeka's smile, behind his sweet words, there was a shadow, a darkness that no one could see yet. Osinachi and Emeka's love grew quickly, like a river rushing after the rains. Every weekend, Osinachi would pack her small bag and go to Emeka's house, her heart full of excitement. When she arrived, he would smile wide and hug her tightly, saying, "My queen, you make my house feel like a palace." At first, everything felt like a fairy tale. Emeka would cook her meals and serve them with a smile. "My queen, come and eat," he'd say, placing the food in front of her. They would laugh, talk, and sit together like two lovebirds. He made her feel special, and Osinachi thought her heart couldn't be any fuller. But then, gradually problems started. It was a quiet evening. Osinachi sat on Emeka's couch, and her phone started ringing. "Who's calling you at this hour?" Emeka asked, his voice sharp like a knife. "It's just my friend," Osinachi replied, smiling as she reached for her phone. But Emeka's eyes darkened. "What kind of friend calls you like that? Is it a man?" Osinachi laughed, brushing off his question. "Don't be silly, Emeka," she said. But the smile on her face didn't last long. However, it didn't stop there. As the days passed, Emeka began showing up at her workplace unannounced. He would lean on the counter, watching her every move like a hawk. "Why are you here?" Osinachi asked one day, confused. "I came to see if you're really working," Emeka replied, his tone serious. At first, Osinachi thought it was love. "He cares about me," she told herself. But his questions became sharper, his tone harder. One weekend, they had an argument. "Why were you laughing with that man earlier?" Emeka asked, his face tight with anger. "What are you talking about?" "He's just a customer," Osinachi replied, her own voice shaking with anger. Before she knew it, his hand came down hard on her cheek. Shocked and hurt, Osinachi's anger boiled over, and she slapped him back. They fought like two wild animals, their voices echoing through the house. Neighbors came knocking on the door, separating them before it got worse. Osinachi packed up her things and left that night. However, the next day, she went back to him, her face still swollen. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I can't live without you." Emeka held her close, whispering promises that he would change. But deep down, Osinachi's heart felt heavy. "This is normal," she told herself. "Every couple fights." But in her chest, a small voice whispered, "Is this really love?" The sweetness of their love began to feel like hot pepper, bright and painful. Still, Osinachi stayed, hoping things would get better. But the shadows in Emeka's heart were only beginning to grow. Osinachi's mother, Mama Ada, was a woman of wisdom. She had eyes that saw beyond smiles and words. From the first time she met Emeka, She felt something wasn't right. His eyes, though charming, held a spark of anger, and the faint smell of alcohol followed him like a shadow. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the air cooled, Mama Ada called Osinachi into the kitchen. The smell of freshly made stew filled the air as they sat on low stools. Mama Ada's voice was soft but firm, like the wind before a storm. "My daughter," she began, her eyes locking with Osinachi's. "This Emeka you're with, he's not a man who will bring you peace." Osinachi frowned, confused. "Mama, what are you saying? Emeka loves me. He treats me like a queen." Mama Ada shook her head slowly, her face full of worry. "Love is not enough, my child. A man who shouts at you, who raises his hand against you, that's not love. Love should make your heart calm, not afraid." Osinachi sighed, trying to hide her frustration. "Mama, you don't understand. Emeka will change. He loves me, and I love him too. Once we get married, everything will be fine." Mama Ada's heart grew heavy. She reached for Osinachi's hand, her touch warm and gentle. "My daughter, love cannot grow where there is no respect. A man who doesn't respect you will not change. Leave him now before it's too late." But Osinachi only laughed, brushing off her mother's words like dust from her wrapper. "Mama, you worry too much. Trust me, you'll see. Emeka will change." Mama Ada sighed deeply, her shoulders slumping like a tree bending under the weight of heavy rain. She knew her daughter's heart was clouded by love, and no amount of warning would break through. As Osinachi walked out of the kitchen that evening, her mind was set. She loved Emeka, and she believed he would change. But Mama Ada's words lingered in the air like the last note of a song, a warning that Osinachi chose to ignore. As time passed, Emeka and Osinachi's bittersweet love grew, and they were ready to get married. The day of Osinachi and Emeka's wedding was as grand as a king's feast. The village square was alive with the sound of drums and the laughter of women carrying baskets of food on their heads. Bright-colored wrappers swirled in the air as dancers moved to the rhythm, their feet hitting the ground like thunder. Osinachi was the star of the day, her face glowing like the morning sun. Her head tie stood tall, and her beaded necklace jingled softly as she moved. Emeka, dressed in his finest agbada, stood by her side, grinning from ear to ear. "You're the most beautiful bride," he whispered to her, making her blush. As the elders blessed their union, Osinachi's heart was full of hope. "This is the start of my happily ever after," she thought, her smile as wide as the sky. After the wedding, Osinachi moved into Emeka's house, excited to begin her new life as his wife. At first, everything seemed perfect. Emeka was attentive and caring, always quick to call her "my queen" and kiss her forehead. But as the weeks turned into months, cracks began to show. Emeka's drinking became worse. Every night he stumbled home, his voice loud and slurred. "Where is my food?" he would shout, banging the door as he entered. "It's ready," Osinachi would reply, rushing to serve him. But if the food wasn't hot enough or the meat wasn't tender, Emeka's anger exploded. "Are you trying to starve me?" he yelled one night, pushing the plate aside. "Emeka, don't shout," Osinachi said, her voice shaking. "Who are you to tell me what to do?" he roared, throwing the plate to the ground. When Osinachi argued back, the fights turned physical. Plates broke, chairs fell, and bruises appeared on Osinachi's skin. "You can't treat me like this," she shouted one evening, but her words only fueled Emeka's rage. Almost every night, Emeka and Osinachi would fight like wild animals, their voices shaking the walls. Plates would shatter, chairs would tip over, and neighbors would rush in to separate them. "You are the problem," Emeka would shout, his face twisted with anger. "And you are a monster," Osinachi would yell back, refusing to back down. By morning, though, the storm would settle. Osinachi would sit at the table, her face swollen, her body bruised. Emeka would look at her, his voice softer now. "I'm sorry, my queen. You know I don't mean to hurt you," he would say, trying to hold her hand. And despite her pain, Osinachi would nod, forcing a smile. "It's okay, Emeka. Let's move on," she would reply, hoping that one day things would truly get better. But when night comes, quarrels and arguments start again. This cycle became their norm, fighting at night, making up in the morning. Osinachi hid her pain behind smiles, but her body carried the scars of their love. The house, once full of laughter, had become a place of endless battles. The next day, when her friends visited, Osinachi forced a smile. "How is married life?" they asked, their eyes sparkling with curiosity. "Oh, it's wonderful," she lied, her voice cheerful. "Emeka helps me with chores. He washes plates, helps with laundry, and even cooks for me sometimes. He's the best husband." Her friends admired her life, not knowing the truth hidden behind her smile. Every day, Osinachi wore a mask, pretending everything was fine, but deep inside, her heart was heavy, weighed down by pain and regret. The joy of her wedding day was now a distant memory, replaced by the reality of a marriage filled with shouting, fighting, and broken promises. After their wedding, Osinachi and Emeka were blessed with a daughter. They named her Chioma, which means God is good. Her birth was a moment of joy, a small light in the middle of their troubled marriage. When Chioma cried for the first time, Osinachi's heart swelled with love. She held her baby close and whispered, "You are my angel." Chioma grew up to be a cheerful little girl, her laughter like music that filled their home. She loved playing with her toys, drawing pictures on the floor, and singing songs she learned from her mother. Osinachi loved her deeply, and even in the hardest times, Chioma's smile gave her strength. But as the years passed, Emeka's behavior grew worse. His drinking became a storm that could not be calmed. Every evening, he stumbled home, shouting and blaming Osinachi for things that weren't her fault. One fateful afternoon, the sun hung high in the sky, and Osinachi was in the kitchen, cooking a pot of soup. The smell of spices filled the air as she stirred the bubbling pot. Chioma, now 4 years old, was in the living room, arranging her toys in neat rows. Her small voice hummed a song, her laughter echoing softly. Suddenly, the front door slammed open. Emeka staggered in, his steps heavy, the sharp smell of alcohol filling the house. "Where's my food?" he bellowed, his voice rough and angry. Osinachi sighed, her patience stretched thin. "I'm cooking it," she called back, trying to stay calm. Emeka's footsteps thundered toward the kitchen. His face was twisted with anger, his hands clenched into fists. "How dare you talk to me like that?" he roared, his voice shaking the walls. Osinachi turned to face him, her heart pounding like a drum. "Emeka, I'm tired of this," she shouted. "I'm not your servant." Emeka's eyes darted to the stove, where the pot of boiling water bubbled furiously. His anger, fueled by the alcohol, blinded him. He reached for the pot, gripping the handle tightly. "I'll show you who's the boss in this house," he screamed. "Emeka, no, stop!" Osinachi cried, rushing to stop him, but before she could pull him back, a small voice called from behind them. "Mama! Mama!" Chioma's tiny feet patted into the kitchen, her arms outstretched. Time seemed to freeze. Emeka turned, the pot tilting in his hands. The boiling water spilled, splashing onto Chioma's fragile body. The house erupted in screams. Kioma's cries pierced the air, her small voice filled with pain. Osinachi grabbed her daughter, her hands trembling as tears streamed down her face. "Kioma, my baby," she sobbed, holding her tightly. Neighbors, hearing the commotion, rushed into the house. They carried Kioma to the hospital, Osinachi running beside them, her heart shattering with every step. But it was too late. The burns were too severe for Kioma's tiny body to bear. She slipped away, leaving behind only silence and heartbreak. Osinachi sat outside the hospital, her face buried in her hands. Her tears fell like rain, soaking the ground beneath her. The laughter that once filled their home was gone, replaced by an unbearable silence. In that moment, Osinachi realized that her love for Emeka had cost her everything. The house that once echoed with Kioma's laughter now felt like a grave. The walls seemed to whisper her name, and every corner reminded Osinachi of the daughter she had lost. She couldn't bear it anymore. One morning, with tears streaming down her face, she packed her bags. As she placed the last item into her bag, Emeka stood in the doorway. His face was pale, his eyes hollow. "Osinachi, don't leave," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Osinachi didn't look at him. "I stayed too long, Emeka. I won't make that mistake again," she said, her voice firm despite the pain in her chest. With her bag in hand, Osinachi walked out of the house. The air outside was heavy, but it felt lighter than the weight she had carried inside those walls. She returned to her mother's home, her heart heavy with regret. Mama Ada embraced her at the door, tears falling freely. "My daughter, I warned you," she said, her voice breaking. "I told you love should not hurt." Osinachi nodded, her head resting on her mother's shoulder. "Mama, I didn't listen. I thought I could change him. I was wrong." Days turned into weeks, and Osinachi began to heal. But the pain of losing Kioma never left her. She turned her sorrow into a lesson, sharing her story with young women in the village. "Listen to me," she would say, her voice carrying the weight of her experiences. "If a man doesn't respect you, he doesn't deserve your love. Love shouldn't hurt. Don't stay where you're not safe." The women listened, their eyes wide with both fear and understanding. Osinachi's words spread through the village, reaching every corner like the wind. Parents began to teach their daughters the importance of self-respect, and young women started to recognize the warning signs that Osinachi had ignored. Osinachi's story became a warning, a tale that parents told their children by the fire at night. It was a reminder that love should bring peace, not pain. As for Osinachi, she found solace in helping others. Though her heart would always carry the weight of her loss, she knew Chioma's memory lived on in the lessons she shared. I hope you enjoyed the story. If so, please like the video, comment what you learned from the tale, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more enchanting tales just like this one. Thank you.